Section 1.1 is about expressions and formulas. We're going to look at some expressions and see the correct way to evaluate them. I want to illustrate that by looking at this example here. If I take this 3 plus 4 times 2 and I do it two ways, you're going to see something. 3 plus 4 here is 7, and then 7 times 2 gives me 14. Now if I go over here and do it a second way, if I first multiply the 4 times the 2 and get the 8, and then 8 plus 3 gives me an 11, you'll notice that there are two separate answers here, but only one of them is right, because only one of them was done the proper way. In algebra, we have these things called the order of operations, and those are the correct order in which you should evaluate expressions. Now you can feel free to pause this and take a look at them. The basics of them are this. You do what's in parentheses first, and if you don't have parentheses, you also include brackets and braces. You do all exponents first, or powers. I'm going to put the word exponents here, because that's a word that we typically use in place of powers. Either one is acceptable. Then you do all multiplication and division from left to right. That's the key. And then addition and subtraction from left to right. One thing we use to help us remember that is PEMDAS, the word PEMDAS. And what it stands for is P is for parentheses, E is for exponents, M is for multiplication, D is for division. Now it's important when you're doing multiplication and division that you understand that multiplication does not come first, but you do all multiplication and division both at the same time from left to right. And then finally addition and subtraction. Again, addition doesn't always come first. You do both of those at the same time from left to right. So the word PEMDAS can be used to help you remember these steps in order. There's also a mnemonic that's used, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, which helps you remember the letters, and then hopefully the letters can be used to help you remember the order of operations. Here's an example where we will use our PEMDAS steps, our order of operations. First we start by looking for parentheses. Now we don't just look for parentheses, we look for any grouping symbol. And we have parentheses along with brackets. When you have multiple sets, you do the ones that are inside first. So we will take the 10 and subtract 4 from it. And now I want you to notice that the parentheses are still there, but now they're no longer grouping symbols, but they now represent multiplication. So I'm going to do the exponents that are inside of the brackets next, because these brackets are still grouping symbols. We still have to work inside of them, but inside of that we do exponents first. So 6 squared is 36, and now multiplication and division come before addition and subtraction. So we'll do 2 times 36. We will now finish the grouping symbol of the brackets off by adding those two together. And then our last step is that we will divide by 5. Here we have a couple definitions. A variable is a symbol, usually a letter, used to represent unknown quantities. The most famous letter is X. Y is used a lot. But you can use any letter to represent a number. An algebraic expression is an expression that contains a variable. So down here you see some algebraic expressions. We're asked to evaluate those. Evaluate simply means to find the value. So since x equals 8, I'm going to take the number 8 and I'm going to put it in for the x. Likewise, y equals 1.5. So I'm going to take the 1.5 and I'm going to put it in for every one of the y's. And now I'm going to evaluate this using my order of operations. Here I see grouping symbols or parentheses 8 plus 1.5. Now I can do the exponents or the powers. 8 squared is 64. Now if you're not careful, you might be tempted to do 64 minus 1.5 first, but that would be wrong because PEMDAS says multiplication and division comes first. And then finally we will subtract 64 minus 14.25 is 49.75. One thing I do want to point out is once you get good at this, you can certainly do two steps at once. For example, you can add the 8 plus 1.5 at the same time that you square the 8. They really have nothing to do with each other, so it's okay if you skip a few of these steps, but you need to make sure that you maintain the order of operations as you solve. Over here, I'm going to plug in the a, b, and c into the algebraic expression. Now I'm going to evaluate using order of operations. 2 cubed is 8. At the same time, I also see negative 3 squared, which is 9, so I'll do those. Multiplication, I notice 2 times negative 4 is negative 8, and negative 8 times negative 3 is 24. And then we'll finish this off by saying 8 plus 24 is 32. And 9 minus 5 is 4. 4 goes into 32 8 times. Here we have a definition of a formula. It's a mathematical sentence that expresses a relationship between certain quantities. And in our example, the formula that we're using is the formula for the area of a trapezoid. Area equals 1/2 height times base 1 plus base 2. Here you see a trapezoid that we're going to use. We're going to plug in the values that you see, and we're going to use our order of operations to solve. So we want to find the area, so we don't know what A is. 1/2 times h. The height of our trapezoid is 10. So we're going to multiply by that, and then we put parentheses. We add the two bases. Base sub 1 and base sub 2 is what you call this. Base sub 1 is 16, and to that we're going to add base sub 2, which is 52. So now we have an expression that has only one variable. We're going to use our order of operations to simplify. We do it in grouping symbols first. In this case, I have parentheses that form grouping symbols. 16 plus 52 is 68. Now we do multiplication and division from left to right. 1/2 of 10, you could make this a 10 over 1 and cross cancel. It becomes a 5 times 68. And then 5 times 68 is 340. Because the area is in square inches, I'm going to say inches squared for my units.